A mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions. Quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Mind that is stretched by new experiences. Is that what you said?
Yeah, a mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its old dimensions.
Wow.
Soak it in.
Yeah, I am here. I'm thinking about it in so many different contexts.
There's a lot of different contexts for it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the most easiest one, right, is like tech. Like for example, or when you get a new car, right, it's your perception of like your baseline changes. Especially like say like a phone. Like I think tech is the easiest because say you got like the new iPhone. Now your minimum standard of a good phone has to be at that newest iPhone level. If you get something like a Nokia, that's like an immediate down. Like that's to you that you can't go any lower than that. So it's like now your baseline is like the new iPhone. So now the next phone has to be just as good. It has to be, if anything, better than that. So it's like that idea of, as you said, like the new experience becomes like it becomes like the new like the new baseline, the new standard for the next one experience. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that you say that because it seems like there are certain experiences, yes, you can't go back to, but then there are experiences that you have to let go of. So, for example, like a drug habit, if you're a drug addict or you're a porn addict, like the first time you've probably watched porn was probably like really like a completely different experience, but that can have really detrimental effects in the long term, right? And so, I mean, there's a lot of studies that show that there's a lot of problems that arises from it, but you need to find a way to go back to the old dimensions and let go of that experience. Now, there's healthy ways to do it, etc. But I think the way this quote is being said is like life experiences in general, or things that you learn, or you know, having a different perspective on things. So, for example, like going through the tragedy of losing someone, grief. That's a very surreal experience that sort of prepares you that nothing is guaranteed in life, and so you will lose things. Or that job, you know, being made redundant, or getting that job, for example, or learning a lot from that job. So there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. But I think there are times where you have to find a way to go back to your old dimension because the new experiences have a very detrimental effect on you.
I also want to, like, it's a good perspective that you bring up as well. And I want to also challenge it as well because there's something called like the Lindy Effect. I don't know if you've ever heard about it.
No.
But it's like apparently like something that lasts a long time will end up lasting even longer over time as opposed to something new that comes into place.
What does that mean?
So basically something that's been around for 1,000 years, you'd think would last another 1,000 years or last a long time. So the easiest example is like books. Like timeless books, like books that have been like, for example, the one I guess you could think about is like religious books or religious texts. I mean, to this day, they're still relevant to some extent, right? And they're still around, and they're gonna last probably even still longer. And they're probably better than if you read it to like that depth. They're probably better than majority of these new self-development, self-improvement books you read. And those new self-improvement books probably last for like a few years and be forgotten. But those religious texts have lasted for thousands of years and will probably continue to still last for thousands of years. So it's like that is like the idea of Lindy Effect, where anything that's lasted for a long time you'd still continue to last for over a long period of time. And I guess like that's why you have classical novels, you have classical movies like, you know, Godfather. People still enjoy watching that still to this day, and so many other things as well. And that's why I think going back to like, you know, now how do you bring us to this perspective? Like some old experiences, I will have lessons, I guess, inside of it, which will be very important throughout the rest of your life, right? And or like some difficulties or difficult moments that you do go through will be the biggest lessons throughout the rest of your life that will still stay as an imprint on you as well. So I guess that's like a way of challenging that as well.
So I'm going to challenge you.
Yeah.
No, not in a bad way. the idea of religious texts, right? There are experiences, like religion has a purpose and there's an end goal that people look towards. Therefore, they place a lot of importance on that religious text, right? So, do you think that's a fair way to say that's a Lindy effect, though? Because it's from a if we just look at why people read the religious text, it's has great lessons, great things about morals and values that you should follow and be the best person possible. But it's also about your spiritual connection with God that gets you to that end goal, right? Which is salvation or whatever it is you want to go to heaven. So then the purpose of you going through that religious text, there's a strong purpose behind that at the end, right? Do you think that's why it's timeless? Because the amount of the level of importance that is being placed by people, rather than it being like I think what I'm trying to get to is that people use those religious texts differently to how they would use like a classical novel or something.
Yeah, well, like the way I see it is like some of the stuff in like, you know, when you read the Bible or the Quran or whatever, like the lessons, the things that they say there are still timeless. Like some of the quotes, like I think in the Bible something says like you reap what you sow. Like that thing is like timeless. And there's like the idea of the golden rule, which is like how you want to treat others. Like you should treat others how you want to be treated yourself. Like that still is quite relevant to this day and age. Like there's things that, I guess what I'm trying to say is like the things that are in those Bible, the Quran or whatever, like even Buddhism, like some concepts, they're still quite relevant to this day. And a lot of the philosophy you look at, like even Stoicism from like Marcus Aurelius, you could say that is a Lindy effect as well, like in the sense that the philosophy behind it and the ideas behind it is still relevant to this day as well. So I guess like that's the perspective that I'm looking at it from. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question. But
No,
yeah.
it does. Yeah. I mean,
Like
I'm looking at it more of a purpose, like what's the purpose of that text compared to where you're looking at it, the content of those texts.
Oh, okay. So I get what you're trying to say. So like the purpose of like spiritual fulfillment,
Exactly.
like that wouldn't be.
I mean, that's why it's become timeless, because it serves a higher purpose.
As opposed to it just being because of the book or like.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that's what you're trying to say. Yeah.
Like people, I put it this way, right? How many people actually read a religious text because they actually want to learn from it and they live by it? Some do, many do, but many don't. Right?
Not as much as you would think.
Exactly. They do it because it's all about, if I read this, I'm just going to go straight to heaven sort of attitude. There's a balance. Do you know what I mean?
I get what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like people are reading, it's like the intention of the reading
Exactly,
it because
yeah.
it's just for the sake of I don't want to go to hell.
Exactly.
As opposed to like actually because like it has like knowledge and wisdom.
Like if I like learning this, reading this, if I live by this, I become a better person. If I'm a better person, I put better energy into people. I put better energy into people. I'm respected. I'm loved. I care for people. I care for the people around me. I love everyone equally. That strengthens your spiritual connection too, right? Because there's no hatred in your heart. Like that's just that one sentence in the religious text. But people don't think of it that way. They just think of it as, okay, I've just read it, cool, heaven. I mean, there's someone out there that's gonna freaking challenge me pretty hard on this, and that's fine. Like I'm not virtue signaling that's what I do. I'm just saying in concept, it's how things are.
Yeah, and I mean, majority of people would probably have that. I mean, I'm not going to deny it. Like, there's that. I think people are fearful of the consequences of not doing it, right?
Exactly.
And that is right. But when you actually look beyond just even that, when you give yourself the time to do that, then you realize there's a lot of other lessons and things that are there and that are still relevant to this day as well. And I think that's where I'm more emphasizing on, because I mean, to be honest, right? Who knows in thousands or 2,000 of years, even if Earth will be around here, you know,
Probably not.
maybe not. Who knows? It might be aliens, right? Completely different race. I'm just saying, you never know. So we might not even exist. So it's like, will religion really exist at that point of time? If we're not around, it won't, right? It'll be something else. So that's a different possibility. But the philosophy, the ideas are just timeless. The philosophy and the lessons in that and things are timeless technically. And I mean, technically you'd think like this book, right? How to talk to anyone is probably not going to last as long as compared to like a religious text. This is like what I'm trying to really say. But
which is true, but it's just the context of how those books and things are used.
But
it's a pretty powerful quote because, you know, there's so many things in life. Like when I think like, for example, like getting married or having your first kiss, your first child, things that bring us different level of euphoria. It can't really take you back to experiencing what life was like before that.
That is actually very true. When I was watching some videos of some guys who are like millionaires or multimillionaires right now, they're like, the first ever best experience that I've ever had wasn't really buying the Ferrari. It was actually buying my first ever Toyota. Like, yeah, Ferrari was amazing, right? Don't get me wrong. But the first exhilarating, like the biggest high that I've experienced was actually the first time buying a car. And then, you know, after buying a Ferrari, it was great, amazing. But I felt more, they would say is like more happy and more, I would say, proud when I bought my first ever car. And that's the thing, right? Like you saying, like the first ever experience is probably going to be the biggest, the most exhilarating, the most euphoric. And the next time you experience it, you'll still be happy and you'll be proud and all that. But the first ever experience is always the best, all the time.
Yeah, 100%. It's an interesting one. It's an interesting one. Like that's what life is about, right? Just finding going for those new experiences, experiencing things for the first time and living in that moment, the now, the present.
And I think it's like, I think that's what truly life is. It's not just about good times. It's also like, you know, whether the experience is negative or positive, it doesn't matter. It's just, that's just how life is. And regardless, like it's going to always give you lessons. Right? As we said, like it's not an L, it's a lesson. So I think that's the way to view it. Like whether it's going to be good or bad, coming out from it, I'll grow. But what was I keep forgetting what the quote is. Like, I remember new experiences, and then the other part was like,
a mind that is stressed by a new experience can never go to its old dimension.
It really does also talk a lot about like dopamine in this sense. Like once you have that new high, it's really hard for you to, that's why addictions happen, right?
Exactly.
With drugs.
That's why you have to go back to your old dimension. You have to find a way to go back to it because you're right. Like, yeah, drugs, porn, sex, whatever it is, money, like being really driven by the fact that dopamine, gambling.
And I was just like, when you were saying that, I was just thinking about it right now that most of these things, and I was sort of reflecting on this yesterday. I'm like, most of these things that we like are addicted to is driven by greed. When I think about the dominant feeling that you have, it's really driven by greed. Like if you're looking at 7 deadly sins, because when you have too much of it, and I think Buddha would say this as well, it becomes poison. Like too much of anything is poison, even water. If you have too much of it, you can have water poisoning apparently.
Yeah, it reduces the amount of salt in your body, which is required to regulate.
Exactly. So, and I think like when you think about it from that perspective, like when you have that, when that greed kicks in, I always think like you're just one step away from corruption, like, or just losing it all. And it's always the case. And I feel like greed, it's not actually money is the root of all evil. It's greed that is the root of all corruption at the end of the day. Like house prices, people that are, you know, just want everything to themselves, making it expensive for everyone else. That, you know, guys are just out here buying like 10 houses for themselves for what reason? They don't need 10 houses.
Exactly.
But they just want to hoard it because they just want the wealth to themselves. It's the same thing as like, if the farmers didn't want to sell to anyone, just want to keep to themselves, and they only sold a fair few, then it'll be expensive for everyone. It's just like how wealth happens. Same with like companies. It's always all, and even asymmetry of information. We have real estate agents that withhold information away from you. They don't tell you about the damages about the house or anything, but they want you to buy it because they're gonna get a cut, and they're gonna sell it to you for premium because it's about themselves. It's just like at the end of, and even with like clout, people filming videos, right? For just clout, like as in someone who has an accident, or two people are in a fight. Instead of you going and like intervening to like stop it or trying to stop it in some way, you record it and you give like your commentating over it to get clout because it's gonna have video, it's gonna have views. So it's like it's always greed. It's not actually money or anything. It's actually just greed that is the root of it.
And you know what? I think you're right. I think like if you look at investment properties, Australia has such a culture around investment properties.
Surfing, and that's what I've learned today. Surfing and properties.
Surfing's great. Nothing against surfing.
Nothing against that, but yeah.
But investment, this idea about like 10 investment properties having that, it's just, I mean, it's a wealth building skill, but it's just like, look, it's controversial. It's controversial, right? I think like when you start a business, you provide value to people. And when you naturally grow your wealth by creating value to people, it's about the input output, right? Investment properties, like it is kind of a selfish way to hoard wealth, right? Like it's like you're not providing any value. Your value lies in that house. The value of the property lies in that house. Value of that property going up. Rent, fine. That's supply and demand. That's how economics work. There's nothing against renting. Like people need to rent. Not everyone can buy a house. But it's just the gap between equal, like the poor and rich just gets bigger and bigger and bigger over time. You know what I mean? Like I'm sure there are people that would want investment properties and stuff, but no one ever thinks about like ideas of like growing a business, starting a business, or thinking of, how do I increase my earnings more? Or how can I provide better value to people? There's not, it's like a quick, like, oh yeah, let's get a loan, get thing. Again, don't think there's anything overly wrong with it. But there's just this, if you want to, the moment you start holding 3, 4, 5, it's like, okay, what is the value that you're trying to get here? Is it wealth? Like, okay, well, fine. But at the detriment of what? Like I probably sound like a full communist right now, which is fine. Like I'm not and that's, I don't care what people would say about that, but I think it's just sort of a mindset shift. Like, but again, not like, I think the way our economy, Australian economy is, it's a low population. So, starting a business and all that sort of stuff, it's hard, like it's hard to get traction. It's hard to get following. It's hard to get that. It's where you go to America or other big countries. But yeah, I think it is greed. It is greed. Like holding 6, 7 properties, and it is a form of greed. Like I just don't see the value in it, but you know what? That's how life is. That's life, right? It's capitalism, and that's how it is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, each their own, whatever it is. I'm just giving like examples of like where greed can really, it comes at the cost of like negatively impacting everyone else in some sense.
It's impacting a lot of people now.
Yeah, and we see it as
Sydney
well, like
house
in
prices.
people's, Sydney house price. There's like an example of house prices. Then there's like the example of asymmetry of information. Lawyers, real estate agents withholding information away from you so that they can make more money out of you.
See, lawyers, I don't mind.
That. Yeah,
because they're smart about it. Real estate agents are just dumb. Like, let's be honest, they're just sleazy salesmen.
But
a lawyer will do it in a smart way to withhold information. They will do it legally. So real estate agents do it illegally. That's the problem.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's like good ones out there, but I'm just saying like there's that type of.
They're all slime balls.
Yeah,
like, they're all slime balls. Put it this way.
Yeah, but it's just I think.
Big whoop, you can sell a house. Who cares?
Yeah, it's.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly, and I think like like it's just greed at the end of the day is what really leads to the demise, and it comes at the cost of a lot of other people. And it can happen with like business, like people have like entrepreneurs. Like say if you and I, we're doing like, or let's just say an example, right? Two people, like two friends, they're doing a business, then they make so much money. Now they're at like the height of getting a lot of attention, and they have a lot of people that approach them. Someone approaches one of them. It says like, "Oh, you can do better than that." Like they start to get like flattered. Like, "Oh, like the other guy's holding you back. You can do better partnering with me. You should probably discard him, work with me." And now the guy is he's like, that guy is now influenced by, I could be so much more. Let me cut off this friend of mine. Cuts it off and then works with this other guy, and then the other guy, the other guy he partnered with is actually using him. But then that came at the cost of his friendship with this other, like the person that he was building with, right? Where they had a shared vision and a shared mission. But now that sort of is overridden by all greed, by greed of wanting more. And then flattery in that sense, like sort of came in to, I guess, like manipulate him. And then it's like, instead of, the business that they were building, it being about the mission of helping people, or like I wanted to be able to provide a value or service to make people feel more happy or content or whatever it is, right? It ended up becoming more about like, I want to have more money for myself. So instead of it being like about the shared mission with the vision, it ended up becoming about just wanting more. And it's just really an empty dream at the end of the day. Like it's just an empty, hollow state you're trying to reach, which is never going to be filled. Whereas, it's just an example of the greed can like come at that cost, but also how dangerous flattery can be when you also become very greedy.
Yeah. And the biggest thing is like working without a plan, unknowing what you're doing. Greed can be quite dangerous because hoarding, it's all about hoarding. It's never enough. At what point is it enough? You never know. If $1 billion is your goal, go hit $1 billion, right? But like at least you have a goal in mind that you want to hoard till. But there's a lot of people that actually don't understand why they're doing it. Like whether it's property, whether it's shares, whether it's whatever ETFs. Like how long? Like what's your goal? It's like, oh, I don't know, just money in, make money. Like okay, but do you actually understand what your exit plan looks like? How you want to exit? What's the plan after that? It's pretty important to consider and think about all that sort of stuff. But
and the thing is, right, even personally experiencing this, like when you do have a plan, once you get to that number, you want more. It just happens. And that's why I always say it's in the stock market or whatever you invest or whatever you do, the biggest emotion you shouldn't fear isn't like, fear is actually where the most opportunity lies. So growth actually happens. The one you should fear the most is greed, because that's where most of the losses happen, because you just get consumed by wanting more and needing more. Or you had that first exhilarating experience, you want more of that. And then that's when, and as I said, you're just one step away from just falling off a cliff. That's how I always think about greed. And it's really true. It comes, I think it really does play effect in a lot of other instances. And then there's always a lot of factors that can come into play in situations like, addictions with drugs. I want to experience more and more of this like exhilarating, euphoric experience, but without the pain of or the struggle or difficulties or whatever it is. But then that short-term pleasure, if you do it consistently over time, become an addiction, comes at the cost of like your longevity, where you're now minimizing years of your life. And also like you're frying your dopamine receptors.
Yeah.
So
it's like you've won, but at what cost?
Yeah, exactly.
But see, some people never actually think about it that way. It's insane. Absolutely insane.
And like a friend and I, we were talking about this, right? We're like, what would your true hell look like? And other than the one we just talked about, it's like, what would true hell really look like? And he gave this example of like, it would be in a room, like basically he's in a top tier position at the company he's working at, but he's alone by himself in the dark. And he, like the description he gave was so vivid, but it's like alone in darkness, like at the office, 8 p.m. working, like although I'm at the top, but at what cost? I have no one around me, alone, isolated, unfit, like everything around me. Like, I'm making a lot of money, but like, and I'm at the top position, but I had to sacrifice relationships and everything else in return for this. And it's like, that's what true hell would be. Like, yeah, I'm at the top, but came at the cost of relationships, friendships, people really don't, and not in a position of where I'm being healthy either. So
it's interesting you say that because, you know, sometimes people, it's important to ask yourself, like, you know, I've won, but at what cost? It's so important to ask yourself that. And if you write down all your costs, everything that you've had to sacrifice, and you're okay with it, fair play. But if you're not okay with it, then there's a serious problem there for you, right?
But the good thing is you can change it at this moment.
Exactly, yeah. Unless you're 50. No, I'm joking.
Still can, but I mean, what is it? The Kentucky, right? Didn't he start
Colonel Sanders.
Yeah. The Kentucky, yeah, the CEO. I was saying the CEO of KFC.
Oh my god.
The guy who started KFC, sorry, I can't remember.
Call him Kentucky, that's crazy.
Bro, I don't even know his name. But
Colonel Sanders.
Yeah, thanks. So what didn't he like find KFC at the age of 80 or something like that?
Yep.
So there you go. Like, and he had to knock on, I remember, like, he had to knock on like hundreds of doors until one of them said yes. And then he just started like cooking and going from that point on. I actually don't know the full story, but I remember he had to knock on every single door manually because they didn't have, like, you know, social media wasn't a thing back then. And he knocked on every single door until one of them accepted the recipe. And then from that point on, he just boomed. And that was at the age of like 80 or something. Like, he founded KFC at 80.
Yeah, he was 90 years old when he died.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because apparently people say that he stole the recipe from a black person.
Oh,
during that time. So I don't know about that.
I don't know at this point. Yeah,
it could be potentially. There's a lot of racism and stuff back then. So,
but regardless, it doesn't change the fact that he was, I mean, successful, and at that age, I don't know, like ethics or whatever he did. Can't who knows the truth, but
yeah,
but anything can happen at that age.
His face is so infamous.
Yeah,
it's so infamous. Like it's everywhere. Who would have thought fried chicken is like so tasty? We'll wrap up here.
Yeah,
I think we'll that was a good conversation. But thanks for listening, everyone. Please like and subscribe to this video and follow us on our socials and streaming services that you're listening on.
Yeah, thanks, Shiv. Thanks, everyone. See you guys in the next one.